with Andy when I was commissioner, and just a great asset for state-based regulation. So really excited to have him here. I'm going to start off, Andy, with, for a lot of our attendees, it might be helpful if you could just give a brief overview of what the NAIC is and what you all do. And a lot of people kind of confuse NAIC with regulators, so it'd be great if you kind of just level set the audience.
Well, sure. And Nick, it's great to see you again. And thank you for inviting me to join the program today. And thanks for also for being flexible with the schedule. The NAIC is not a secret organization, like some folks think. Although I have to admit, before I joined the NAIC, I probably had some of those thoughts myself about the organization. But I've been with the NAIC now a little over 23 years, coming in through the legal side as general counsel, and then moving over more to the operations and senior management. And I've really enjoyed my time working not only with the staff there at the NAIC, but with folks like you, commissioners and insurance regulators out there across the country. So the NAIC is actually a nonprofit Delaware corporation. But unlike a lot of other corporations, the NAIC doesn't have any shareholders. We have members. In fact, we have 56 members, and they represent the chief insurance regulatory officials of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 5 U.S. territories. Our executive committee, which you served on at one point in time, serves as our board of directors. So different title, but essentially the same function. So we like to say that the NAIC is a regulatory support organization, but what does that really mean? And as you noted, Nick, the NAIC is not a regulator. We do not, the organization does not have any regulatory powers per se, but it does provide a number of essential functions for the regulator community. We provide forums for national meetings and other get-togethers for the commissioners, as well as other important stakeholders, insurance industry representatives, consumer representatives, to discuss, debate various insurance regulatory policy issues that may be important at any given point in time. We also serve as an important clearinghouse to collect data and perform analytics. And when I say collect data, we're collecting data on behalf of the regulators, because I think they realized back in the 1990s it made more sense, especially as everything was transitioning from a paper-based marketplace to electronic-based regulatory compliance. It made sense to have a central clearinghouse rather than having individual states collecting the information separately and then trying to disseminate that among the states. So we've been very proficient, I think, as an organization in developing the electronic platform to collect all of the financial information from insurers, the annual statements, the quarterly statements. So it's come a long ways since those early days. But that's an important function too for the organization. We also, as part of that reliance or that emphasis on technology, we've developed a number of other applications designed to help the regulators do their jobs more efficiently. Probably one that's more well known for most folks in the industry is the system for electronic rate and form filing, which we affectionately refer to as SURF, whereby most of the filings now that come in for insurers, policy filings are filed through that platform, and it's electronic based, and it's actually going through a major rebuild at this point. Again, trying to modernize that application. And then the other thing I would touch on is the NAIC. We have 3 offices. The central office, of course, is in Kansas City, and then we have an office in New York that works and monitors the capital markets, also focuses on credit rating or credit analysis. And then our office in DC focuses more on health policy as well as international. So But we do have a really experienced team of subject matter experts, a number of actuaries, both on the life, health, and property and casualty side, as well as CPAs that work on the financial, regulatory, and solvency area. We have a fairly robust legal staff that helps support the members' efforts when they're generating model laws, model regulations, white papers. So it's a pretty impressive team of folks, I think, that provides a lot of what we call back office support for the insurance commissioners and their staffs across the country. So that's a long way of describing a little bit about what the NAIC does.
No, it's great. And like you, I didn't know really what the NAIC did behind those closed doors before I became commissioner, but I always tell the story of my first EU-US dialogue. Andy talked a little about international. I somehow got drafted by Mike Considine, who's now the CEO of the NAIC, to go on this trip. Long story short, he had to bail on that trip because his governor wouldn't let him travel. So I become the only commissioner going on this trip. And the team at the NAIC gives me a great prep class, and they give me this binder. It's a 3-ring binder full. And I go, well, where's the Cliff Notes version? They go, well, that is the Cliff Note version. But yeah, the team does a nice job. A lot of subject matter experts in a breadth of areas, and really do help regulators on some of those complex issues. They're not regulators, but there's not a commissioner that would have been able to get ready for that kind of a meeting with 3-week notice without the help of that team. And again, it was a great experience. So I do applaud you, Andy, and the whole team there. Kind of from a regulator standpoint, though, what risks does the NAIC consider to be top of mind in today's world? What are you all looking at today that's sort of keeping you up at night or working with your members on?
Sure, sure. And generally, you remember from your days as a commissioner, we break it down into 2 areas, both the solvency and market regulation. And those are general categories, but they're always top of mind. But where it really starts breaking down is you start getting down into the weeds in those categories. I would say that at the beginning of every year, the commissioners come together and kind of map out their strategic priorities for each year. And it's really an interesting process because, again, it's led by the NAIC officers and the executive committee, but all of the members get involved in it. It usually takes place in late January, early February. And they recognize that the organization and is dealing with a number of different issues, but they've tried to focus on the top 4 or 5 areas for that year that will prioritize efforts and resources to try to make some headway in addressing the issues. So let me give you a couple of examples for the priorities for this year. One is long-term care insurance. As you probably know, there have been a number of solvency issues in this area over the last decade plus, and it still remains an area of concern and focus for the regulators. Another one is climate and resilience. Certainly with the changing climate conditions, the increase in the number of catastrophic events, whether it's wildfires, flooding, other severe weather events, there's a big focus on both resiliency and coverage gaps. And they actually created an executive level task force the year before last to focus in that area. And again, with the recent Hurricane Ian hitting Florida a few weeks ago, that's just another prime example of not only being, from a regulator standpoint, being prepared to address not only the solvency issues of those insurers that may be impacted and with coverages in those affected areas, but also there's a lot more focus now on resiliency and trying to work with not only insurers but the public in general to educate them about taking steps, measures on the front end to try to limit their exposure, their risks for these types of events. I've got a couple of other notes here on some things. We've also been spending some time on race and insurance, as well as creating a new standing committee on innovation, technology, and cybersecurity. And for that new standing committee, which I think they're really working some fascinating areas, um, big data, the use of artificial intelligence. And I actually think that those areas are going to be prime areas of continued focus over the next few years because there's a lot of interesting work going on. And so I think the members of the organization, the insurance commissioners, are going to really be focused on that area.
Yeah, and if I think about it, Andy, from the time I was commissioner to the end, every year we had that kind of prioritization meeting that Andy was talking about. And then every single year something happened that wasn't on that list, right? And so, but it is a very robust process. And one of the reasons I think state-based regulation works so well is that Iowa comes to there with a little bit different perspective, obviously, than California. And California comes with a different perspective than New York. And so, in an odd way, when you get together in that room, everyone has that voice, and we can all work together on those top priorities. And then when the other events happen, whether it's a Hurricane Ian or other major issue, we all do work together very well. And so I think it's a process that, again, was foreign to me, but one that I actually kind of look forward to. That's probably my favorite meeting of the year, honestly, with all the commissioners. So looking at innovation, obviously, Andy, when I was commissioner, that was sort of the tip of the spear. We just started really focusing on those issues around algorithmic underwriting, big data and the use of big data. But how has the regulators' view of innovation evolved, and kind of what's the current state of their view of innovation right now?
Nick, I remember you and I having conversations about this area off and on, going back to your time as insurance commissioner and subsequently when you moved on to your next career move. It's a fascinating area. It's something that I've always been interested in. And I would say that, generally the insurance regulators have a very positive view of innovation in the insurance marketplace. Um, there's always a balance because on the one hand, you look at the benefits to the consumer. More products could be, more tailored products, maybe improved service. Um, from a company standpoint, you look at it from operational efficiencies, and not only for insurers, but also for agents, producers. And the regulators will always balance the innovation aspect of it with consumer protections. They're always going to look at it as, are the consumers protected? So that's that natural balance between the two. But by and large, I know many of the insurance commissioners uh, really welcome the opportunities to engage in discussions with the innovators and the insurtechs, the existing carriers, about innovation and new technologies in the insurance space.
And along those lines, one of the things that I grew to really admire, to Andy's point, commissioners are very open, and even the staff, other than Mike, are very open to conversation. Sorry, Mike, are very open to conversations around how do these things. But when I was commissioner, though, we would have some of these startup entrepreneurs show up, and it was very clear early on that most of them did not know what an insurance commissioner was or what that person did, because the things they would say to you out of the gate, you're like, please never say that again. So I think the NAIC and commissioners has done a tremendous job of kind of working with these startups and the firms that, I know Oscar was one of the firms I talked to very early on. So we have someone from Oscar here. But the NAIC has done a great job of working with those entrepreneurs and those startups, and creating frameworks and sandboxes and things of that nature, so that, because I don't think there's any commissioner I've ever met that wants to stifle innovation. They want to make sure that the consumers are protected, clearly. They want to make sure the company's not making an outrageous bet on solvency, clearly. But I think the state-based system allows for the flexibility that you can try an idea and work in a state or two states or 4 or 5 states versus trying to go national. So I think we do a nice job as a regulatory nation to hopefully have more innovation come forward versus some other countries that have been a little bit more stringent on these things. So I think the NAIC, again, has really supported commissioners in that effort. So kind of a related question. It's not perfect, so there are some rooms for improvement. How does regulation need to evolve, Andy, in your mind, to kind of keep up with the pace of change and what's happening?
Well, there's no question that the regulation aspect of insurance needs to evolve, and I think um, the majority of the regulators that I talk to certainly agree with that. They recognize that the industry, the insurance industry, will lead innovation, and that's the way it should be. That's where the capital is. That they have the business model to innovate and drive, for more. They've got to be able to make money to stay in business. But the insurance regulators, they want to be able to keep up to some degree. We used to joke about this, where the insurance regulators have to stay close enough. They've got to see the taillights of the.
Glad you used that line. I was going to use it. Good job.
Yes, I think if I recall, that was your line.
Maybe.
But it made a lot of sense. And but they recognize that, again, the private sector is going to lead that innovation engine down the tracks, if you will, and they've got to be able to stay up with that. And that's why they wanted to be engaged with not only the industry, but actually some of those innovation hubs too. I remember, Nick, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you were the first insurance commissioner to attend a program there at Plug and Play in Silicon Valley. And we participated, the NAIC's participated in a number of those programs over the years. And it goes back to, it's a two-way street. It's not only helping the insurtechs, the new people coming into the space, understand what that regulatory framework looks like, but it's also educating the regulators to understand, hey, there are really some bright minds out there with some innovative ideas, and there's some pilot programs going on here, and open your eyes and see what's going on, and become more aware of it. So that all of that has been a very helpful process. I remember the first time we took a group of regulators to InsurTech Connect in Las Vegas a few years back, and it was just so eye-opening to see all of the energy there in the insurance space that was focused on innovation and InsurTech. So it's been an interesting ride over the last few years. That's not to say that there's still a lot more that we need to do. I would also say that, yes, we're talking a lot about what the insurance industry is doing and what they're working on. But it's also important for the regulators that again, when we think about the supervisor or supervisory tech, to make insurance regulation work more efficiently. That's also an important aspect that the regulators think is very important. Making sure that the tools they're using, work as efficiently as possible to eliminate unnecessary burdens on the industry and the other actors in the insurance space.
Andy, and that the first trip we had to Silicon Valley and InsurTech Connect back in the day, I think it was very eye-opening to many of the members. And one of the things that stuck out to me was, again, I went to the first one, I went with Ted Nickel and Dave Jones. Ted was the Wisconsin commissioner and one of the officers of the NAIC, and Dave Jones was just Dave Jones, commissioner of California and larger than life personality, but very smart guy. But again, we went to that meeting with totally different views of how things should be and would be, and we, I was a very pro-business state, right? And California is a very pro-consumer state, and Ted's just Ted Nickel, if you know him. So when we got to the meeting, though, one thing that stuck out to me was sitting down with these entrepreneurs and hearing what they were working on. And this was in 2014 or 15. It was one of the first cohorts they had at Plug and Play, and thinking to ourselves like, wow, these are some ideas that are going to really have to come to fruition, because carriers are going to have to figure out, are these friends? Are they foes? Do we invest in them? Do we buy them? And so my mind was just racing right out of the gate like that. And so you think about where we've come from there to now with the billions and billions of funding that's gone into these enterprises. A lot of them are full stack carriers now. A lot of them are partnered with carriers like mine, to go to market quicker on different solutions. And again, I don't think had we not kind of plowed those fields early on, we'd be having kind of some of the successes we're having now. And so whenever again, going back to what I said earlier a little bit, whenever I hear people say that regulators are the problem, I just don't buy that, because I've been with Dave Jones from California in these meetings. And once he's kind of learned how they were going to go to market, what they were going to do to protect a consumer, Dave thought that their business model made sense. And so again, there's laws that need to be changed. There's laws that need to be updated for sure. And there are some states that are a little bit more cutting edge than others for sure. But again, I think it's really important to stress that I don't think regulators really are the problem. This is a risk and opportunity forum, Andy, and one of the risks I think that the state-based system has is, I think the average tenure of a commissioner is 22 months, give or take. So a lot of turnover in those roles. So, what do you all do at the NAIC to sort of make sure that those commissioners, kind of understand the jobs that they've walked into, the role of the NAIC, and kind of get that broad exposure right out of the gate? Kind of walk them through that.
Sure, sure. We have a fairly extensive onboarding process for the new commissioners, and I use the term commissioners and members interchangeably because, again, that's just what we do here. But for the newer commissioners, again, we'll have them go through an orientation session so that they start to learn a lot about the organization, what we do, and also some of the things we don't do. But we try to do a level set so that they understand, how the organization works, the things we can do to help them and their staff. We also have an educational program that's open to all regulators. And we encourage them that if there are areas of the insurance sector, insurance regulation that they don't understand, we encourage them to take some of the classes. And we have a number of subject matter experts that can easily spend time with them, getting them up to speed on the current issues in some of the areas. When I have my conversations with a lot of the newer members and they ask, well, Andy, what areas should I get involved? Which committees and which task forces? And I always reply to them by saying, listen, if there's an area that you're interested in, get involved in it. Even if you're not a member of a standing committee, you're invited to sit in on the meetings, participate in the discussions. We develop issues briefs on so many different areas. You got to do a little bit of homework, but you can get up to speed. And the other thing I think it's really cool about the organization itself is the commissioners, they are very open and accepting to all of the new members, bringing them on board. It's a unique fraternity, and it's something that I've really respected the members about over the years because they have a very special bond working with one another on some very important issues. We also have a mentor program that we've set up, and we always assign what we call a more seasoned or experienced member with some of the newer members to kind of help them adjust. Not only talk about some of the issues they may be facing just as a new commissioner in their own department, trying to get settled in their own department, as well as just what's going on at the NAIC, what are the hot issues, what should I focus on. And Nick, you'll recall we also have the 4 geographical zones within the NAIC, and that would be the Northeast zone, the Southeast zone, the Midwest, and the Western. And so there's roughly 14 to 16 states or I should say 12 to 16 states in each of those zones, and they have their zone meetings. But those zones are set up so that they can work as groups, helping each other, again, deal with those issues of common interest. So that's another process by which newer members get indoctrinated into the organization, get exposure, working with their colleagues, And we always find that very helpful.
Yeah, no, I know for me, having that mentor out of the gate was great. The zone and the camaraderie you build, and still pretty good friends with most of those folks today. So it is a great way to learn from people that have been there and done that, and it's a great program that the NAIC's put together to help commissioners get on. Because again, I think the average tenure is probably around 2 years. The elected commissioners, I think there's 12 elected commissioners, right, Andy? I
Yes.
think. So, yeah, but most are appointed, and the tenure's probably 2.5 years on average. So, Iowa's a little bit unique, but most states it turns over quite a bit. And probably looking here ahead in a few weeks, we might have a lot of new faces show up possibly at the NAIC, depending on what happens here and the elections coming up. So, it's a job that you take. You're pretty much, serving at the pleasure of the governor in most states. Iowa's not at the pleasure of the governor, but in most states, when you're appointed, you do serve at the pleasure of the governor, or sometimes there's a intermediate cabinet person between the commissioner and the governor. But so you are a little crazy to take a job, realizing you can be fired in any second. But it's a great job. So again, this is a risk conference, but we're doing it at a university, Andy, Drake University, which I know you're familiar with, and you've been to Des Moines several times. Drake's got a great actuarial program, good insurance program. Kevin, who you've now met at least virtually, is a key member of that. So what advice do you have to the industry to attract that next generation of talent and develop that talent so they look at insurance as a viable career or even an interesting one, possibly?
Well, it cannot be understated, the importance, not only on the industry side, but also with the regulator community about the need to bring in new talent. And our discussions with industry representatives, it's an area that they focus on all the time consistently is the need for new talent coming into the field. And um, and I think when I was listening to the previous panel, I heard someone say, very few people go to college with the idea, hey, I'm going to get into insurance. All right. I know that when I was in college and when I was in law school, I never thought that I would end up going down the insurance regulatory path, if you will. I mean, I was general counsel at a life insurance company back in the 90s, a small life insurance company. Um, and that's something that was not predicted, or certainly wasn't foreseeable for me from a career standpoint back when I was in law school. But opportunities present themselves, and you get into it, and you find out how interesting the field of insurance really is, and more importantly, you really come to appreciate the important role that insurance plays in our society. It's critical. And a lot of people just don't understand that. But I know that we've taken steps to actually create a new foundation. And Dr. Terry Vaughn, whom I think many of you know there at Drake University, she is one of the directors of the new foundation. And the focus of this new foundation is to provide scholarships and internships for people from underserved communities to get, that are focusing, their career path uh, in the insurance area. It could be actuarial, it could be something tied to financial analytics or some other areas that are pertinent to insurance. But we're really excited about setting up this foundation. And, when we set up our race and insurance, the special committee on race and insurance, one of the areas one of the work streams that was established was really to create more career opportunities in the regulatory space for people of underserved communities. Now, we think the need is broader than just, the underserved communities, providing jobs for folks in underserved communities. But that's just one area of focus that we've targeted over the last couple of years. But yes, Nick, I can't agree more about the need, to attract more talent. And my personal opinion is that effort needs to start when these people are in high school. Whether it's And I know Iowa has a great financial literacy program that they set up, which I think is great. It was fantastic as far as giving younger people exposure to the role of insurance when it comes to uh, budgeting, financial planning. Um, and that's an important part in educating people about the role of insurance. And I think that's what it takes to get them interested early in life to start pursuing some of those career opportunities.
And I totally agree. And for those here in the Des Moines area, we've partnered with Pi 515 to Andy's point in a high school and middle school even group. I'd recommend the high school, a little bit easier to work with high school students, but it's been that's a great organization that's focused on technology. Well, what do we need in insurance? We need a lot of technology people, right? Even if you're not building the innovative solutions, you need people that can understand how to integrate those solutions and bringing those young people into your office, giving them meaningful work. It's really, it does work with underserved students here in the Des Moines area. So it's been a phenomenal nonprofit here in Des Moines. And full disclosure, I'm on the board, but I do say if you're someone in the Des Moines area looking to sort of go a layer down into the high schools, there are great opportunities in the Des Moines area. So just email me or find me on LinkedIn or something. I'll direct you there. So, Andy, I don't know if I had any other prepared questions here. So I know we got a little bit of time, but if there's any questions, I don't know, the audience or is there any chat or something, we could probably got time for, okay, we got one question in the audience. So hold on one second. Let me get a mic out there.
As you look very quickly here at 2023 staring us in the face, what do you see as maybe the top 2 or 3 new or different challenges that are going to be faced by the NAIC?
That's a good question. Some of this is a little bit of guesswork right now, but we've already begun working with our incoming president, Director Clara Lindley Myers from the state of Missouri, um, is mapping out some, again, preliminary planning at this point, and nothing's etched in stone. But I think some of the issues dealing with long-term care insurance will certainly continue. The regulators have set up this multi-state review forum that they'd like to push further, and part of that, as far as reviewing the filings and making recommendations on rate increases. And I know that the insurance industry has been somewhat disappointed uh, because not enough states have been participating in that. And consequently, some of the regulators have been disappointed because not enough companies are participating. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 back and forth. But I think there's a new push to try to get more states to participate in that multi-state review process. And hopefully that will incentivize more of the companies to use it, because it's about the emphasis here really is to try to streamline the process, but also to make it more uniform across the states. And that's been a challenge over the last few years. So that's one area I think that you'll see continued focus. I think in the area of the innovation technology, cybersecurity, the new standing committee, I know that they have an ambitious agenda as far as in the area of trying to develop some sort of regulatory framework for dealing with the use of artificial intelligence in the industry. The regulators developed the AI principles here. I think it was 2-3 years ago, and I think they'd like to build off of that now. Going back to the earlier discussion about innovation, uh, and I was saying that the regulators generally, they really support and they're excited about innovation. But again, on that consumer protection side, in the area of AI, they understand that companies are beginning and using more AI to do the underwriting, the marketing, probably the claims handling. But they just want to make sure, that it's being done in a way to where, again, the consumers are protected. So I would think that from next year, there's going to be more attempts to dialogue with the individual insurers to see how to educate the regulators on how these companies are using AI, the safeguards that they may have in place to make sure that that the AI is being used fairly properly. I also think in the area of climate resiliency, the focus will continue there. Not so much on disclosures. That's an area, you know, that gets a lot of attention, and some of our members are participating in that effort, you know, as far as requiring insurers to make those filings, and that's all good and well. But I think there's going to be continued focus on the resiliency side, because again, coverage gaps and resiliency are two areas that we hear mentioned a lot in the discussions between the regulators. So those are just some examples of areas that I think are going to continue to get a lot of focus next year.
Great. Any other questions? Right, got one back there.
How much refereeing do you have to do between states that sometimes just don't see eye to eye on certain issues, or do you have enough off-ramp mechanisms that effectively work?
Well, we try to keep sharp objects away from them at times. No, just kidding. Just kidding. I mean, it's a good point, because, you know, the strength of the state-based system is certainly the diversity among the members, you know, coming at it from 50 different perspectives and trying to reach a consensus. But Nick, as you know, it is sometimes, depending on the issue, it is extremely challenging to get all of the members on the same page on a particular issue that may be somewhat contentious. And sometimes, you know, it takes longer. Sometimes, you know, you pretty much have to go as far as you can get with the states that you have, and in recognizing that not all of the states are going to be on board. So some would say that's the Achilles heel of the state framework. It's on some issues, they just cannot get the ball across the goal line.
So I'll jump in there because I'm not a commissioner anymore, so I can talk a little bit more freely. To Andy's point, it works and it doesn't at times. And, you know, case in point, Michael knows this pretty well. I became Mr. Captive not that long ago, even though Iowa is not a quote captive state, but because of a special purpose vehicle statute and regulations around that, you know, another state, New York, did not like that. And so it turned into that whole shadow banking thing. And, you know, Ben and I are still friends, Ben Losky, Superintendent Losky, we had many heated debates behind closed doors, and even in the New York Times, for instance. And we never agreed. But I think that, you know, Iowa was proven right. I think that the captive structure we had in place works pretty well and takes redundant reserves off the table and gets products priced a little bit more effectively for consumers. But, you know, that was one issue that we were never going to agree on, you know, and but during all of that, we were very cordial. Our teams worked very well together. We had transactions we worked on outside of that together. And so there are moments where you're not going to agree. And at that point, you know, NAIC, Andy and his team kind of exit stage left, and they are Switzerland in most of those things. And because they're not a regulator, and they don't really take side. They love all their children equally, and so it is but it does happen. I mean, there's
Yeah.
I can think of many more like that. That just one is front and center to me. But it's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great example too, Nick, because when you started talking about that, it brought back memories, and I remember specifically some of the dynamics of that episode.
Yeah, I have the scar still, so yes. Any other questions? Oh, we have one more. Okay.
You've referenced resilience a couple of times in the past hour, and I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit. And then the part B to that is, as a continuity professional, my interest is, what are you hearing from the regulators in the states in the sense of continuity requirements?
Okay, I'm going to talk about the resiliency first, and the example that I'll give you is in the aftermath of the wildfire in California a couple of years back in Paradise. It pretty much destroyed the entire town. And I remember going on a tour. Nick, you'll appreciate this. We did a similar thing after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The NAIC funded a program where we had regulators from the western part of the United States we were coordinating with the California Insurance Department. And it intended to be an educational program. And we all flew into Sacramento, met with Commissioner Laura and his senior team, and then loaded into a bus and took the ride up to Paradise and spent the full day meeting with the city officials, both at the city, county, and state level, to talk about the issues that they were facing in rebuilding. And it started out with real basic factors such as, well, how is the municipality going to get insurance? Because they were having a hard time getting insurance, and you can't really rebuild a community unless the government structure, has the insurance in place to do that. And then we were having a discussion with some of the local developers and county officials about having stronger codes in place. And this touches on the resiliency area, and that is making structures more resilient to these types of catastrophic risks, whether it's the materials that are used in the building process itself to ordinances that require property be kept up in certain ways. Maybe you're not allowed to plant shrubs or trees or bushes within a certain proximity of the building, and you're required to cut the lawn and make sure that everything is kept up. Again, trying to prevent these structures from catching fire so easily. So it was a really fascinating program, great dialogue, and the developers, some of them push back. We can't have a code a building code that's too strong. Otherwise, it's going to be too expensive to rebuild, and no one will want to move back in here. So a little bit of back and forth there, but it was a great program. I think a number of the state officials in California were really impressed, with the dialogue and the issues. I know we've also set up an educational program with with IBHS, the industry-backed program based there in South Carolina, where they do the simulations on hurricane strength winds, but they'll also do burns now, to where again they're testing for wildfires. And it's a way for regulators to understand more about this education process. But it's also a way where the industry recognizes not only do you have to get government officials involved with this education process, but you've got to come up with really good, strong educational programs for the public, for the consumers, and the insurance companies, and I think some of the states are putting together packages where, structures that qualify for these higher strength standards, qualify for insurance discounts in their premiums. So there's some financial incentives, for building stronger. So I hope those, when you hear me talk about resiliency, I hope those represent some examples. With the area of continuity, I would probably ask for a little bit more clarity there, with your question.
One sec.
So what we're starting to hear from the continuity side is the states are looking at more regulations and requirements from a continuity program from the insurance company standpoint. We're just starting to hear some more of that things. New York DFS being one of them, where we're starting to hear some of that a little bit
Okay.
right now.
Okay. And to be honest with you, I have not heard as much in the area of continuity from the NAIC membership as a whole. But I also recognize that New York, the state of New York DFS, just as well as California, can sometimes be leaders in some of these areas, which I mean, that's just the way it is. Those are two large states that can be trendsetters, if you will. But as far as the membership as a whole, it's not an area that I'm hearing a lot of attention at this point. So, as far as short-term prospects into next year from an NAIC standpoint, I'm not aware that work will be a high priority.
I'm not either, and I talked to a lot of commissioners still, and it's not on, but I've seen stuff out of New York for sure, so. All right, any other final questions? All right, Andy, I don't think we see any more questions. I want to say thanks, Andy, for joining us remotely. I know you wanted to be here, but the Commissioners Conference had to trump this, so, but we do appreciate you taking the time to join us today and offer your thoughts and comments. It's been very helpful for us, this group, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Nick. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to join this group. I have very fond memories of some of my trips up to Des Moines. It's a great city.
Thanks, Andy. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you to all attendees online and in person. Thank you for all of our presenters, our steering groups, our sponsors, our hosts throughout the day. Importantly and interestingly to me, as I kind of checked off through the list of presenters, we had 17 or 18 people up here on stage or on screen, and 6 of them are Drake alumni. And so when you look at the importance that our university has, the impact that it has in the risk management institutes and the whole industry, it's significant. So I want to give everybody a little applause and love for that. But for that, thank you very much and look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.